The media in the United States is fixated on the Republican fractures to the extent that they choose not to cover those moments in which the Republican Party is united. They choose not to cover details that may show the Republican Party has validity to its points. They choose to ignore the fact that it should be notable. In fact, I would argue it should be highly notable when a Republican Party, as fractured as it is, takes a united stand. It's hard to herd cats. It's harder to herd Republicans right now. And the media is so fixated on a fractured Republican Civil War, they say. Pay no attention to the fact that Republicans from Liz Cheney to Marjorie Taylor Greene, the spectrum of Republicans, are united against the Democrats' $1.9 trillion COVID package. Why would they be united against it? Well, here's Senator John Kennedy to provide you a hint.
95% of President Biden's bill is not going to even be spent until 2022 and beyond. This isn't a coronavirus bill. This is a left of Lenin neo-socialist wish list. I mean, it just is. It is chock full of spending porn. They've got money for transit projects and bridges and language preservation, billions for people who are in our country illegally. I am all for spending additional monies to combat the coronavirus, but this bill isn't it.
It is not it. Here is Senator Mitch McConnell.
Yesterday, I discussed the K12 crisis facing American families. The science shows that in-person schooling can easily be made safe. Private and religious schools and schools in Europe have been open for months. But Washington Democrats have apparently bought into big labor's myth that schools cannot reopen without even more federal funding, even though their own plan would only spend about 5% of the money this fiscal year.
The Democratic plan, between 91 and 95% of the money, won't even be spent this year. It won't go to COVID relief. It goes to bailing out states, particularly state pension plans, blue states that made bad deals. It goes out to labor union pension funds to bail out labor union pension funds. It goes to universities. It goes to the National Endowment for the Arts. It goes to build a tunnel near San Francisco Nancy Pelosi wants. It goes to build a bridge in New York that Chuck Schumer wants. It doesn't really go to open schools. It doesn't really go to anything related to the shutdown, to the extent that it goes to states now. It punishes states that reopened early. Georgia will get punished in the Democrats' legislation, despite having just elected 2 Democratic senators. Georgia is going to get punished by the Democrats because Brian Kemp opened the state early. And as a result of that, Georgia is doing better economically than other states. As a result, Georgia's state unemployment rate is around 5%, while other states that have been shut down longer will be much higher. But the money isn't just going to people who are on the unemployment lines. It's also going to states per capita based on the unemployment rate. So a state that reopened early, did everything right, and had an economic rebound is going to be punished. A state that did everything wrong and hasn't had an economic rebound is going to be sustained, and those are the Democrat blue states. There's a poll circulating from Quinnipiac. Now, you should know in 2020, Quinnipiac actually had really terrible polls. Across the board, fairly universal, Quinnipiac's polling was bad. If you want a sense of just how bad Quinnipiac's polling is right now, according to the Quinnipiac poll being used by the media to claim that this COVID relief package is broadly popular. By the way, I'm sure it's broadly popular when the media isn't pointing out that 91 to 95% of the money isn't even going to be spent this year and isn't even related to COVID. I'm sure as long as the media refuses to tell that truth, and it is true, of course, a lot of people in the public will say, hey, they're going to spend $1.9 trillion this year. Absolutely. No, actually, they're not going to spend $1.9 trillion this year. And if you think they are, you're delusional. But Quinnipiac has a poll out that says, oh my gosh, this is just the greatest thing ever. We don't know anything about it, but we love it. This same Quinnipiac poll that the media is using to show broad support for the COVID-19 relief package shows 15% of Republicans love Chuck Schumer. 15% of Republicans love Chuck Schumer. 13% of Republicans love Nancy Pelosi. Do you know a single Republican who loves Nancy Pelosi? Do you know a single Republican who loves Chuck Schumer? That's important and relevant because this is the poll that the media is using to base broad bipartisan support for this COVID relief package. When you hear the media say the Democrats' plan has quote unquote broad bipartisan support, end quote, they are using a Quinnipiac poll that shows 15% of the Republicans, not the public, 15% of the Republicans approve of Chuck Schumer and 13% approve of Nancy Pelosi. I get the media's desire to focus on the Republican Civil War. Far better for the media to focus on the crack up of the Republican Party than the fraying of the Democratic Party. I get the media wanting to peddle Democrat talking points. It's what they do. But to abandon all reason on this and to not even tell you the truth about what's in this COVID relief package and that it's not really a COVID relief package, it's a grab bag of neo-socialist funding, according to John Kennedy, the senator from Louisiana. That's what it is. I mean, honest to goodness, how many of you have heard that? How many of you have heard that 91 to 95% of the funding doesn't even go for COVID? How many of you have heard that most of the money won't be spent until 2022 and 2023? I bet the majority of people don't know that. What would happen if the Democrats had to tell them that? What would happen if the media told them the truth? Here's a little more from Senator Mitch McConnell.
The partisan legislation Democrats are preparing to ram through looks like something you'd pass to blunt another year of shutdowns, not to help guide a smart and proactive recovery. It looks more like another big bandage for a mostly shut down country rather than a launching pad to help us get back on offense. Look at schools. All the facts and hard evidence show that with simple safety precautions, K-12 schools can and should be reopening safely right now. Yet the Biden administration is going out of its way to avoid getting kids back in school. They have their own experts contradicting their own recent statements and their own CDC backpedaling from the hard science, all to accommodate big labor's goalpost moving. Just look at the proposed money in their new partisan bill for K-12 schools. They call it an emergency relief fund, but just 5% of the money they want would be spent in fiscal year 2021. 95% of this so-called emergency relief for schools would go out in fiscal 2022 and beyond. Or take the economy. Experts across the spectrum say that incomes, savings, job opportunities, and industry outlooks are already rebounding. Further aid needs to be smartly targeted so government doesn't get in the way.
Did you know that the COVID relief package expands federal funding of abortion? Did you know that despite the Democrats saying they were going to do this, one of the key things that's not there is a requirement that nursing homes report COVID-related deaths accurately? There's no money for unemployment insurance fraud protection. There's no adjustments to ensure abuse victims aren't having to go through their abusers to get checks. There's none of that in there. Democrats said a lot of that was going to be in there, and that abortion funding wouldn't be in there. And yet there's going to be massive funding of abortion, massive funding of union pensions, massive funding of blue state bailouts, massive funding for the National Endowment for the Arts, a bridge, a tunnel, colleges and universities being bailed out. Only about 5% will actually go to deal with COVID. The Republicans, from top to bottom, left to right, Trump to never Trump, are 100% united against this piece of legislation. And the media would rather run a bad poll that shows 15% of Republicans love Chuck Schumer and support this bill. And oh, look, Liz Cheney, she's saying something that's awkward. And Marjorie Taylor Greene, she's fighting the Democrat over transgenderism. Let's not actually talk about what the Democrats are actually doing with the legislation.